episode 73.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
Ready to take a vacay, but you just don't have the time to plan? Let the agents at 3D Travel Company pamper you and take care of all the little details. Find us at www.whodidthatvoice.co and click the Book Now button on the left-hand side. For a limited time, Who Did That Voice listeners can receive a Disney gift card for qualifying Disney and Universal trips, booked and traveled by 2017. Hurry and book today so you can travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hey everyone, just a quick word today. Wanted to let you know we have launched a Patreon page. You can find us at www.patreon.com/whodidthatvoice. What is Patreon, you say? Well, it's a lot like a Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign that allows you to help support us on a monthly basis. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support the show. And if you support before August 31st, 2017, you will get the title of executive producer and all the perks that go with the amount you donated. Help us out today and join the Who Did That Voice family in a new way. Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest joins us all the way from voicechasers.com. She is the creator and founder of that site, of that company, and she will be joining us today as our special guest on Who Did That Voice. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show we have Kristy Sproul joining us today. Kristy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you today, Kristy. Thanks so much for giving us some of your valuable time.
Sure.
The very first thing that we always like to start off with the show, Kristy, is just to get to know our special guest. Now, you are not someone who is in the voiceover industry, but you're a person who has a very big passion for voiceover. So just tell us a little bit about you and how you got your interest with voiceovers.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm probably a little oddball. Well, I am in many ways, but not in the voice industry. I've been a fan of voiceover and the guys in that industry for about probably a little over 20 years now. Back in 93 or 94 when Animaniacs started, it was kind of early in the world of the World Wide Web, right? So there wasn't much resource out there at the time. And when Animaniacs came on, my friend and I, who were also big Ninja Turtle fans, were watching Animaniacs, and she said, Yakko sounds like Raphael. And I said, no way, that's impossible. And if you remember back then at the time, I mean, if you watched an animated series, most of them, when you watched the credits, it was just a big block of names. So you weren't really sure who did what in the show. And Animaniacs was one of the very few shows that had listed, who did what in the show. So that show kind of became a keystone for us.
Okay.
And so what we would do is we would write everything down that we knew. So we wrote all the credits down for Animaniacs, and then we would tape every show that was on at the time, fast forward to the credits, write all the names down, matched up who was in both shows. Then we would say, okay, we know this character is in Animaniacs, rewind the other show, go back and listen through the episode, and then we would listen for that specific voice and figure out which character it was. So it was kind of like a game that we would play.
Wow.
And and we would just kind of collect all these names, and we would have just papers, by actor and then by show, and we would just compile all this data. And there was also a group of us on Prodigy. I don't know if you remember Prodigy, but it was kind of like AOL, a little before AOL, like CompuServe. And there was a handful of us on there, and we would just all go in and compile data as we figured it out, or went to the library and looked through books and, as much as we could. And then around 96 or so, we had all this data, and I'm like, what are we going to do with all this information that we have? So I wound up, back then my parents had, some web space via their ISP. And so I kind of learned how to code and put it all up on the internet. And then people started finding themselves because there wasn't much resource at the time. So the first actor that contacted me was Joe Alasky.
Okay.
He's the voice of Daffy, right? And sent me a note and said, hey, here's my updated resume. Here's my headshot. Here's my demo. And so now I had like real factual data, and it just kind of just snowballed like that, where people will put on, it's free publicity for them, being on the internet, all their credits were up there. And we just started compiling all this stuff, keeping it up, doing news, interviews with these guys. And I started to go to conventions and meeting these people who are just the greatest people in the universe. And that was kind of it. So that still doing it today. That was about 20 years ago. We actually started the website, and it's grown, and we're still going.
Well, that's fantastic to hear, Kristy. And sadly, Joe Alasky, who was your first actor to contact you, has sadly passed away.
Yes.
And,
very sad.
He was Plucky Duck on Tiny Toon Adventures, and he was on the Plucky Duck Show. So
that's right. That's right.
And he's done countless other things, but those are two of the things that people would most notably know him from. So
yeah, great guy.
But anyway, that is fantastic that Joe reached out to you. And would you say that the number of actors you've contacted and been in touch with over the last 20 years has grown pretty numerously, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone is so generous in this industry. You probably know already.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and meeting them at conventions and stuff. And, typically we would have some kind of correspondence already. So they kind of knew who I was. And I'm very lucky to have friendships with a lot of these people. They're just the greatest people. So very talented and zero ego. And, more people, when we started doing the website, we're like, these people have so much talent and nobody knows who the heck they are. And we want to change that, and so it's definitely gotten better, and people they're getting much more recognition now than they did 20 years ago, which is great. So
absolutely, Kristy. And for those of you who might be wondering why Kristy is on the show, she isn't a voice talent, but she's a person who shares voiceover passion just like I do. And the reason I created my show, Kristy, was for some of the same reasons. People in the voiceover industry just don't really have a voice in the essence of, pun intended. They don't really have a voice in the outside world, in the sense of people know their voices sometimes, and they don't even necessarily correlate this show to that show like we do. But they go, oh, I remember that voice, but they don't ever think who the actor is because it's not very in their face, like a movie star, so
right.
In live action film. So that's part of the reason I did the show, but just because of the passion I grew up with, loving voiceover from my father, and just the inspirations that cartoons had on my life, and a lot of different reasons, but voiceover's always had a huge place in my heart long before I even knew what it was. So
yeah.
So growing up, Kristy, were you a girl that watched a lot of cartoons, or was it just okay?
I did. I would say my first is probably a little different than most girls my age, but I would say my first big obsession was probably He-Man.
Okay.
Of all shows, and it kind of went from there. So if I can think of like the timeline of, I'm going to call it the timeline of obsession, because they're the ones that stick out the most. But it was probably like He-Man to probably My Little Pony to Ninja Turtles. Those are the biggies. Yeah. Animaniacs, stuff like that. Care Bears a little bit, but those were the 3 or 4 big ones that I went through with childhood.
Well, you haven't mentioned it yet, Kristy, but you have a company called Voice Chasers. What is Voice Chasers, and how did that come to be? Was that at the beginning with Wacko and Yakko and Dot, or was that with the Animaniacs? Was that at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably should have mentioned that. Yeah. So Voice Chasers was started when we had all this data. Okay. And I put it up on a server, and we didn't have a domain name at that point. But we called it voice chasing because we were kind of chasing the voice from show to show. That's kind of how the name started.
Like a storm chaser.
Yeah, exactly. Chasing the storm. Yeah, so we're chasing that voice. Although it sounds a little stalky, but it's totally not meant to be that way. But that's how it started. And we kind of just became a resource for this stuff, because there really wasn't any other resource at the time to find out who did what on a show or a commercial or something like that. Because you're watching a commercial and you recognize it almost instantly, but you can't always place who it is. So we wanted to kind of be that resource and give the recognition that they deserved at the same time. So, so that was the company, quote unquote, that we created. It's more of a labor of love, I guess, than anything. And that's how it all started.
Absolutely. Well, I know the other day I was just watching an HGTV show with my wife. Can't remember the name, but I remember that Roger Craig Smith, who also plays Captain America, and he plays the voice of Ezio, for those of you who are Assassin's Creed lovers, he was on this show announcing, like, now they're going to cut this wood at a 90-degree angle. And I'm like, that's Captain America. I'm like, wow.
That's the best when you figure that out, too.
I was like, that is fun game. Yeah, it is. It is so fun. You're like, who is that? I know this voice. And then you have to go look it up, and you're like, oh my gosh, I knew it.
Exactly.
So, but it's great because the resources we do have at our hands now today, the digital world, the internet world, it makes it so much easier. I'm sure for you guys, it was like a needle in a haystack, but it made it like an adventure, you know?
It was a game. It was definitely a game for us. Yeah.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
So what would you say your favorite cartoon was growing up, and your favorite cartoon character? And they don't have to be correlated. They can be separate, you know?
Cartoon was probably Ninja Turtles at the time, just because that shaped a lot of my life. Still a Ninja Turtle fan to this day. Character, golly. I don't know if I could pick one.
Or it could be a couple different ones. It doesn't have to be just one.
At the time, probably Michelangelo was my favorite. I always joke that Michelangelo was my favorite turtle when I was a kid, and now that I'm an adult, it's Leonardo now because he's the more mature one. So my taste in turtles kind of matured as my age went up. But yeah, probably Michelangelo back then, just because I was just kind of fun-loving and all that kind of stuff. I like that kind of personality. And and I always joke that the turtles, I don't know if you've noticed this for turtle fans, but there's so many female Ninja Turtle fans like me that I've met now that, I've been on the internet so long. It just kind of connected with all these people that I didn't know there were any other female Ninja Turtle fans other than me. But I found that they are probably the most passionate fans over the guys that I've found. I don't know why, but, I'm sure that they weren't expecting that. When they were creating the show, that they were kind of targeting towards boys, but yeah, I'd say the girl fan base is very, very strong and very passionate about the fandom. So that's cool stuff.
That's fantastic to know. I didn't realize that there was such a huge female fan base there as well.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I just saw a bunch of my friends that are big Ninja Turtle fans at New York Comic-Con this past weekend. So
that must have been fantastic.
Yeah, it was fun.
So, Kristy, were there any other techniques that you guys used besides watching shows and going back and forth to kind of find out who the actors were on the shows? Were there any other, books or resources that y'all were able to use? Or
yeah, I would go to the library a lot. There wasn't as many books, but I would. So the names that I knew, because as you know, the same guys kept coming up over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so I would do searches that way, like in the library. I would see if I could find any books on them. There's some for movies. It was a little easier because those are more documented. But the animated series, they really weren't. But there was also magazines. So the first magazine I found, I had never seen a picture of like Rob Paulson before or Jim Cummings before. But there was a magazine for the Boy Scouts called Boy's Life, and I think it was 6 one of the issues of the magazine, some a very old magazine.
Okay.
And there's actually an interview with Rob and Jim in the magazine talking about their voiceover stuff, and there's little pictures of them in there. I actually have a scan of it. I'll send it to you. It's cool to just read that article, and that was one of the first ones I found. I was like, oh my gosh, look at these guys. And the Disney, what was it called? The Disney Adventure magazine, was that the name of the magazine?
I think there was one called something like that, if not that.
Yeah, the little one you could get in the grocery store.
Yeah,
they actually had some articles with the voice artists in it too, when they were promoting the shows and stuff. So that was always cool. So I would always pick all that stuff up and just eat it up. And that would just and just gather as much data as I could as went along. So
absolutely, Kristy. Well, what was the inspiration with He-Man? Why was he such a big character for you?
I don't know. How old was I? I think it was in preschool or kindergarten. Somebody had a figure, had one of the action figures on the playground. I was like, oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then I begged my parents to go to the store and get a He-Man. But I think Manny Faces was the first guy I actually got. I think he was the only one they had at the store at the time, so we bought it. And then I just started amassing this collection of He-Man figures and stuff, and watching the show. And I don't know if there's anything about He-Man in particular. I just enjoyed the show, and I liked the characters and the way it was done, and the voiceover was good too, I guess. But I didn't recognize that at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah. I don't know what it was about that show in particular. It was just I was just drawn to that style, I think, for some reason.
Well, he is a very fascinating character, and I know even as a young kid, I remember, when he called out, I have the power. It was just very like resonating in your ears, and it kind of like got you pumping, like your adrenaline was going, and you're like, yes, I have it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, a great show, and they've revamped it 1 or 2 times, I think, since the original. And done some pretty good stuff with it. But, I think Gary Chalk came back and played in one of the later renditions. People remember him as... Sorry, go ahead.
Cam Clark. I was going to say, Cam Clark was in
Leonardo?
the 2002... Yep, Leonardo was in the 2002 series that they did. He was He-Man in that one. Yeah.
I didn't know that, but that's fantastic to know.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow, that is crazy. But as I was saying before, Gary Chalk played in one of the versions that came out with He-Man, and he, for most of you guys, he was Optimus, but before that, he was Optimus Primal from Beast Wars. So
that's right.
Fantastic show. But Gary Chalk and I were talking the other day, and I told him, I don't know if you ever saw King Arthur and the Knights of Justice.
I did not. I know the show, but I've never actually seen it.
It's like Power Rangers meets medieval times, and it's like 2 of my absolute favorite things. And I was always like, you know what? They need like Night Rangers. They had like the Mystic Rangers that were like magicians, wizards or whatever, and witches. But I was like, they really need like medieval knights. Like King Arthur is the main one, and so like Power Rangers should totally do that. But I told Gary, I was like, man, somebody needs to take King Arthur and the Knights of Justice and make it a live action movie, and I want to be involved with that film.
There you go.
Even if I'm the water boy on set.
Yeah, cool.
I was like, because it's so fantastical, because especially with the graphics that we have today.
Yeah.
I just watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, I think was the subtitle of the new one. It was so much better than the first one. And usually the first ones will get it dead on. And then after that, you're just like, no.
Yes.
But the second one was way better.
Agreed. Yeah, that they had a lot of problems with that first one. You could just tell they just cut and chopped that thing up. There's so many holes in that first one, hardly any turtles in it.
Yeah, I mean, it was exciting, but the second one, I mean, with Bebop and Rocksteady, and with Krang, like everything was so dead on. The Technodrome, I felt like I was back in the days of the cartoon. It was fantastic.
Yes, lots of fan service in that new film. I got to go to the premiere in New York a couple months ago. It was great, just being with all the fans and stuff. Yeah, it was amazing. And Vanilla Ice was there, and he did a ninja rap for the audience before the movie.
I saw the live stream.
Yes. It was fun.
I still love Vanilla Ice to this day. So
me too.
But like in the end credits of the new Turtles movie, they actually kind of splice in the Vanilla Ice ninja rap with the original Ninja Turtles theme, which was like super cool.
Cool mix. Yeah. They did a good job.
Again, they said, hey, everybody loved the cartoon. Everybody loved the 1980s, 90s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle live movies. And they just meshed everything into one conglomerate. And I was like, you guys are super smart.
Yes. I think they finally realized they were trying to target, the kids today, but I don't think they realized how many people were still fans of that franchise now that are so passionate about it. So I think they definitely recognized it after the first one when they got so much blowback from it. But yeah, they did a good job on the second film for sure. Yeah,
my wife was even like blown away because we watched it and she was like, "Honey, this was so good." And my wife, she geeks out, but I'm the geek. You know what I mean? And for her to be like, "Whoa," about Ninja Turtles, I was like, "Wow, they did a really good job to impress my wife."
Is she an animation fan too?
She is, but not to the extent that I am. You know what I mean? So for her to be able to be vocally out there and say, wow, I mean, they did an amazing job.
yeah, totally.
So, because it's not the fans, although, you want to service your fans when you do something, but if you can get a person who's, sort of a fan or not quite as into it as someone else, if you can get them to be as passionate as a fan about it, they've done their job and they've spent their money well.
True, definitely, for sure.
Because then they grow their fan base. So
exactly, that's how it does. That's how it works. Yep.
Well, Kristy, do you guys have a website? I think you might have mentioned it, but I don't recall.
Oh, I probably didn't because I'm terrible about promoting myself.
It's okay.
Voicechasers.com is the website. I'm in the middle of revamping it because it's what's up there is a little old, and my real life job has been and my real life has been taking over. But we're working on a refresh right now. and in July, I don't know if you go to voiceactorsrock.org, that website, we actually did a concert since it was our 20th anniversary this year. We wanted to do something cool. So there's a lot of voice actors that are also really good musicians, because there's a lot of skills that are parallel, right? So
Absolutely.
pitch and rhythm and all that kind of stuff. And so I've noticed that so many are really good musicians, and I'm a big fan of their music because I'm a musician too. So I wanted to get these guys together and showcase the music side of the talent that most people don't know about. And so we had Rock Sugar, who's Jess Harnell's band. He's Wacko and Animaniacs and other stuff. They do like a pop metal mashup. They headlined the concert for us. Tom Kenny, who's the voice of SpongeBob, has a 11-piece soul band, and they're amazing. They totally stole the show. E.G. Daly has had a music career for a couple decades now. She performed for us. Troy Baker, who's in a lot of video games now, has a record that's just probably one of my favorite records of all time. If you haven't listened to it, I highly suggest to pick it up. And Sitting in the Fire, I think, is the name of the record. And then we had Tasmaniacs, which is actually a band that Debbie Derryberry and Jim Cummings and Rob Paulson formed 20 years ago. And they reunited for the show. Rob unfortunately couldn't make it, so instead we got Billy West and Robbie Rist to fill in. And they were fantastic too. They played a lot of old, good, like 60s, 70s stuff, just really good stuff. And it was a blast. We had a lot of fun. So yeah, that was the highlight of the year for me, for sure. So we kicked off the 20-year anniversary well, I think.
That's fantastic. And I know my buddy Tim Nidell was out there.
Yes,
and,
Tim.
I really wanted to go. He was making me super jealous with all his live posts.
Yeah, it was awesome. We're hoping to do it again next year with some different acts.
Fantastic.
A couple of there's a Canadian band that I want that called Hey Ocean that I want there, and some other folks. So hopefully we'll be able to do it again, because there's still a lot of musicians we haven't had on the stage yet. So we'll see. Hopefully again next year.
Hopefully you will put that info out there as soon as it's available, because I know I would definitely love to come.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, what is a way, Kristy, if people want to reach out to you and just talk with you, or share their passion for voiceover with you, what's a way they can reach out to you? Facebook or email? Or...
Yeah. On Twitter at Voice Chasers, all one word, and on Facebook it's /voice actors on Facebook, but you can search for Voice Chasers at Facebook. You'll find us there that way too. And yeah, either way, they can definitely reach out. Instagram Voice Chasers too. So any of those ways, I love to talk about the stuff anytime. So love to find other people that are as passionate as I am. So I'm glad you and I connected too, Trent. So
most definitely, Kristy. It's very great to connect with like-minded individuals, for sure.
Totally.
Well, I have one final question for you, Kristy, before we let you go.
Sure.
My question is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
That's a hard question. I would say I want to make sure that these guys that have so much talent really do get the recognition that they deserve, and I hope that that Voice Chasers is one way for that to happen. So I hope that we're at least a little bit of part of that, and I think it's definitely growing. I mean, I was just telling someone the other day, when I used to go to Comic-Con like '98, the panels for the voiceover stuff was hardly full. It was in a small room, Mark Evanier's panels at San Diego Comic-Con. And the lines for the autographs were very short. Sometimes they were just kind of sitting there with nobody around. And now I think Mark has like 2 or 3 rooms put together, and they still have like standing room only in those rooms. Wow. And trying to get autographs now, there's just lines, especially like people like Tom Kenny and stuff, that just, the lines are just crazy. And I just love to see that. I got to sit with Cam Clark a couple of weeks ago at RetroCon, helping him with his autograph stuff, and just watching the way that the fans interact with him and how much they, and just knowing who he is just so cool to me. That just makes me super happy to see that they're getting the recognition they deserve. So.
Absolutely, Kristy. Well, thank you so very much for being on the show today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, Kristy, thank you so very much for being on the show today. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you. Would you just give us a closeout today?
This is Kristy Sproul from voicechasers.com, and you're listening to the Who Did That Voice podcast.
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Kristy Sproul from voicechasers.com. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. You know, a question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us this Friday for our next special guest, Burt Ward, the boy wonder himself, Robin from the Adam West Batman. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they've voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.